Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. Here's the deal. Roxy Hart, a Vegas hooker with a busted past, asks a worn-out millionaire for one lousy buck outside a cheap motel. Vince Malone hands it over, but when a scratched-up USB slips from her pocket, he swipes it and finds a dance that flips his world. From glitter to grit, this is the dollar dance, a raw ride of scars, secrets, and second shots. Subscribe now. What's a dollar worth when it's all you've got left? Guess in the comments, this one's gonna cut deep. The night hung heavy over Las Vegas, a mess of flickering neon and stale heat that clung to everything like cheap perfume. Roxy Hart stood under the chipped awning of the Desert Rose, a squat two-story motel off the strip where the lights barely buzzed and the paint peeled like old skin. Her nylon dress, black, too tight, bought for $5 at a thrift shop, stuck to her thighs, damp from the sweat of a long shift. She leaned against the wall, one heel kicked back, the other tapping a slow, tired rhythm on the cracked concrete. Her lipstick was smudged, a red smear from too many forced smiles, and her dark hair hung in a messy knot, strands sticking to her neck. It was past midnight, the hour when the drunks stumbled out of casinos and the hustlers started their rounds. Roxy scanned the street, headlights cutting through the haze, a couple of cabs idling by the curb, the faint clatter of slot machines drifting from a dive bar across the way. She needed $10 to cover tomorrow's rent, or Old Man Pete at the front desk would toss her stuff into the alley again. She'd made 7 so far. 3 from a trucker who smelled like diesel, 4 from a tourist too drunk to count his change. $3 short, and her feet ached like hell. A Ford Explorer rolled up, its dull silver paint catching the glow of a Budweiser sign. The driver's door creaked open, and out stepped Vincent Malone. Vince to anyone who mattered, though not many did these days. He was 48, broad-shouldered but slouched, his graying hair tucked under a faded ball cap. His button-up shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his boots scuffed the pavement with the wear of a man who'd stopped caring about polish. He owned a handful of small hotels around Vegas, not the flashy kind with fountains and showgirls, just cheap beds for folks passing through. A millionaire on paper, sure, but you wouldn't guess it looking at him. Roxy straightened, pasting on a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, fella," she called, her voice rough from too many cigarettes and too little sleep. "Spare a buck for a gal who's had a rough night?" Vince paused halfway to the motel door and turned. His face was lined, tired, but his hazel eyes flicked over her, not with the usual pity or disgust, just a quiet curiosity that made her shift on her feet. He dug into his jeans pocket, fishing out a crumpled dollar bill, and held it out without a word. His fingers brushed hers as she took it, rough calluses against her chipped nails, and she caught a whiff of him, coffee and something earthy like motor oil. "Thanks, mister," she said, tucking the bill into her bra, the paper crinkling against her skin. She turned to shuffle back toward the curb, her flip-flops slapping the ground, when something slipped from the pocket of her torn denim jacket. A small black USB drive hit the pavement with a faint clack, rolling a few inches before stopping near Vince's boot. Roxy didn't notice, her eyes already on a group of rowdy guys spilling out of the bar across the street, potential marks for her last $2. Vince glanced down, brow furrowing. He bent slow, knees creaking, and picked it up between 2 fingers, turning it over. The label was scratched but legible. Roxy, Stardust, 2013, scrawled in faded Sharpie. He shot a quick look at her retreating back. Hunched shoulders, swaying hips, a woman who'd learned to fade into the noise of this city. He slipped the USB into his pocket, casual as if it were a stray quarter, and headed inside without a sound. The Desert Rose lobby smelled like mildew and burnt popcorn, the kind of place where the carpet stuck to your shoes and the clerk barely looked up from his phone. Vince nodded at Pete, graybeard, stained t-shirt, and grabbed his mail from the box behind the counter. He'd been crashing here tonight, checking on a busted AC unit in room 12, too tired to drive back to his place across town. Upstairs, his room was a shoebox. Single bed with a lumpy mattress, a desk piled with receipts, a window that rattled when the wind kicked up. He dropped his keys on the nightstand, the jingle loud in the quiet, and sank into the chair, rubbing his eyes. The USB sat heavy in his pocket, nagging at him. Stardust, 2013. The name tugged something loose in his memory. Stardust Lounge, a burlesque joint off Fremont Street, back when he still took Lila to shows, trying to play dad between fights with her mom. He pulled it out, rolling it between his fingers, the plastic cool and scratched. "What the hell?" he muttered, fishing his beat-up Dell laptop from his bag. The thing whirred like a dying engine as it booted up, the screen flickering before settling. He plugged in the USB, clicked the only file, a grainy MP4 labeled Roxy Live, and hit play. The video crackled to life, a stage bathed in red light, jazz horns blaring through tinny speakers, and there she was. Roxy, younger, maybe 25, her dark hair swept up, eyes sharp and alive, glided across the boards in a black silk dress that shimmered like oil. She moved like water, all grace and fire, her hips swaying to the beat, arms carving the air with a precision that made you forget the world outside. The crowd whooped, faint in the background, and for 3 minutes she owned that stage, every spin, every dip, every damn step, a story of someone who'd been going somewhere. Vince leaned back, the chair creaking under him, his coffee breath fogging the screen. He remembered that night, 2013, Lila 16, sulky in a booth beside him, her first time sneaking into a show. She'd loved it, whispered, "That dancer's badass, Dad." Her rare smile lighting up the dark. Roxy Hart. The name clicked now, a whisper from a life he'd let slip away. He glanced at the window, the neon glow bleeding through the blinds, and pictured her out there tonight, ragged, hollow, asking for a buck like it was all she had left. "What happened to you?" he said under his breath, shutting the laptop with a soft snap. The room went quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the distant rumble of traffic. He didn't know her a damn thing. But that dance stuck with him, a ghost he couldn't shake. He'd seen enough Vegas wrecks to guess the story. Bad luck, worse men, a dream chewed up and spit out by this city. Still, something about her eyes tonight, sharp, defiant, even through the wear, gnawed at him. He tossed the USB on the desk next to a stack of unpaid bills and a half-empty pack of Camels. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she just lost it, some old keepsake from a better day. But Vince wasn't the type to leave puzzles unsolved. He'd built his little empire fixing things, leaky pipes, broken deals, busted lives, and this felt like a loose end. Tomorrow he'd swing by the Desert Rose again, see if she was still kicking around, not to play hero, just to know. Outside, Roxy counted her haul, $10 even, enough to keep Pete off her back. She trudged up the motel stairs, her flip-flops sticking to the grime, and fumbled her key into room 8. The door groaned open, revealing a sagging bed, a TV that didn't work, and a sink stained brown. She dropped onto the mattress, springs creaking, and pulled the crumpled bills from her bra, smoothing them out on the blanket. $10 wouldn't buy much, just another day of this. But it was hers. She didn't notice the USB was gone, didn't feel the empty pocket where it had sat for years, a relic she hadn't watched since the night she'd copied it from a friend's camcorder. It was her last dance at Stardust, before everything went to hell, before Johnny, before the streets, before she stopped being Roxy Hart and started being just Roxy. She kicked off her shoes, the ache in her feet spreading up her legs, and stared at the ceiling, a water stain spreading like a bruise. "One more day," she muttered, closing her eyes. Across the hall, Vince lay on his bed, boots still on, the USB glowing faintly in his mind. He didn't know why it mattered, didn't know what he'd do if he saw her again. But he'd be there tomorrow, dollar in hand, waiting for a chance to figure it out. Vince has got a piece of Roxy's past. Think he'll chase it down? Hit subscribe and drop your guess in the comments. This story's just kicking off. The Vegas night had cooled off by the time Vince Malone pulled up to the Desert Rose again, the air sharp with a rare bite that cut through the usual smog. He parked his Ford Explorer under a street lamp that flickered like it was on its last legs, the engine ticking as it settled. He'd spent the day bouncing between his hotels, fixing a clogged drain at one, arguing with a vendor at another. But that USB, Roxy, Stardust 2013, had nagged at him like a splinter he couldn't dig out. He'd watched the video twice more that morning, coffee going cold on his desk, her dance looping in his head, graceful, fierce, a woman who'd owned the room. And now, here he was, back at this dump, not sure what he was chasing. Roxy Hart was where he'd left her, propped against the motel wall, her denim jacket pulled tight against the chill, one flip-flop dangling off her foot. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pink glow over her face, highlighting the shadows under her eyes. She was counting bills again, her lips moving silently, fingers trembling from the cold, or maybe just exhaustion. Vince stepped out, boots crunching gravel, and fished $1 from his pocket, same as last night, crumpled and worn. He didn't know why he'd come, not really, but those 3 minutes of video had lodged somewhere deep, and he needed to see her up close again. "Hey," he said, voice low, holding out the bill like an offering. "Rough night again?" Roxy looked up, her grin automatic but brittle, like cracked glass. "Always is," she said, taking the $1 with a quick snatch, tucking it into her bra with the others. Her voice was rougher tonight, scraped raw, and she hugged her arms tighter, shivering. "You're turning into a regular, huh, mister?" "Guess so," Vince said, shoving his hands in his pockets, the USB a small cold weight against his thigh. He studied her. Hair a mess, lipstick faded to a ghost of red, but those eyes still sharp, cutting through the haze like they could see right back at him. "You danced before, huh? Stardust Lounge?" Her whole body stiffened, the grin dropping fast. She stepped back, flip-flops slapping the concrete, her hand clutching the jacket like a shield. "Who told you that?" she snapped, voice spiking with something close to panic. "I don't dance, not anymore. You got the wrong gal." Vince didn't flinch, kept his tone steady, casual. He wasn't about to spill that he'd swiped her USB. Didn't want her bolting before he got answers. "Saw you once," he said, half true, leaning on memory instead of evidence. "Years back. Best show in town. Black dress. Whole place lit up. That you?" Roxy's eyes narrowed, searching his face for a lie, her breath puffing out in short, visible bursts. "Maybe," she said finally, slow, like she was testing the ground. "Maybe it was. What's it to you?" She crossed her arms, defensive, but there was a flicker in her stare. Curiosity, maybe, or just plain weariness. "Got a hunch," Vince said, nodding toward the diner across the street. A greasy spoon called Moe's, its windows fogged with steam. "Buy you a coffee? Warm you up? Hear your side?" She snorted, a dry, bitter sound. "You some kind of do-gooder? I don't need saving, mister." But her stomach growled loud enough to betray her, and she cursed under her breath, kicking at a pebble. "Fine. One coffee. Then you leave me alone." They crossed the street, the diner's bell jingling as they stepped in. The place smelled like burnt oil and day-old pie, the kind of joint where the seats stuck to your legs and the waitresses called you hun. Vince slid into a booth by the window, vinyl creaking under him, and Roxy sat opposite, her jacket bunched around her like armor. A tired woman in a pink apron, Doris, her name tag said, dropped 2 chipped mugs on the table, coffee sloshing over the rims. "Cream?" she grunted. Roxy shook her head, wrapping her hands around the mug, the heat seeping into her cracked knuckles. Vince sipped his, black and bitter, watching her over the rim. "So," he said, setting the mug down with a soft clink. "What happened? Stardust ain't exactly the road to this." He waved a hand at the diner, the motel beyond, the whole damn mess of her night. Roxy stared into her coffee, steam curling up past her nose. "Lost it all after one bad night," she said, voice low, like she was pulling the words up from somewhere deep. "Helped a girl out backstage, some drunk asshole hassling her. Pissed off the wrong guy, and next thing I know, I'm out. No gig, no cash, no nothing." She shrugged, a small, broken gesture. "That's Vegas. Chews you up, spits you out." Vince's gut tightened, a memory clicking into place. Lila, 16, wide-eyed at Stardust, telling him later about a dancer who'd yanked her out of a fight with her shithead boyfriend. "She was badass, Dad," Lila'd said, grinning, one of the last times he'd seen her smile before the divorce tore them apart. He leaned forward, careful, testing. "Girl named Lila? Short hair, mouthy?" Roxy's head snapped up, coffee sloshing as her hands jerked. "How'd you know that?" she asked, eyes wide, darting like she might bolt. "She was just some kid. Didn't even get her name till after. How the hell do you—" She stopped, swallowing hard, suspicion creeping in. "She's my kid," Vince said, quiet, the words heavy as they hit the table. "Lila. Took her to that show, 2013. She told me some dancer saved her ass that night. Guess that was you." The diner went still, or maybe it just felt that way, the hum of the fryer and the clatter of plates fading out. Roxy's mouth opened, then closed, her fingers tightening around the mug till her knuckles went white. "Your kid," she echoed, voice cracking. "Jesus, small damn world." She laughed, sharp and hollow, shaking her head. "Didn't do her much good. I got bounced for it. Next night they canned me, said I stirred trouble." Vince's jaw clenched, a slow burn starting in his chest. "You got screwed for helping her," he said, more to himself than her, the coffee turning sour on his tongue. "She came home that night. First time she wasn't pissed at me in months. You gave her that." Roxy looked away, out the fogged window where the neon bled into the dark. "Yeah, well, cost me everything," she muttered, her voice thick. "Job, apartment, whole damn life. Ended up with Johnny after that. Thought he'd help. He didn't." She rubbed her eyes, smearing mascara, and took a shaky sip. "Don't need your thanks. Too late for that." "I owe you anyway," Vince said, leaning back, the booth creaking under him. "Not pity, just a coffee. Maybe a sandwich if you're hungry." She glared at him, but her stomach growled again, louder this time, and she sighed, defeated. "Fine. Ham and cheese. But this don't make us pals." Doris shuffled over with a plate, ham and cheese on white, edges curling, a pickle spear on the side. Roxy tore into it, crumbs falling, her hands steadying as the food hit her system. Vince watched, quiet, the USB still in his pocket, a secret he wasn't ready to spill. He didn't know why he cared, didn't know what he'd do with this. But Lila's grin from that night, and Roxy's dance on that grainy video, kept him here, tethered to this booth. "You got a place?" he asked, casual, sipping his coffee. "Somewhere that ain't a shithole?" Roxy swallowed, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Motel's fine," she lied, voice flat. "Keeps the rain off. Don't need your charity, mister. Vince, right?" "Yeah," he said, nodding. "And it ain't charity, just asking." She smirked, faint, the first real crack in her armor. Sure it is. Guys like you always got an angle. She finished the sandwich, brushing her hands on her jeans, and stood. Thanks for the grub. See you around. Or not. She shuffled out, the bell jingling behind her, leaving half her coffee on the table. Vince stayed put, the mug warm in his hands, staring at the spot where she'd sat. Lila's badass dancer, he muttered, shaking his head. He didn't know what broke her, didn't know if he could fix it, but he owed her something, even if she didn't want it. Tomorrow he'd swing by again, see if she'd bite. For now, he'd keep her USB safe, a piece of her he wasn't ready to give back. Roxy's dance tied her to Vince's kid. Think she'll let him close? Hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. This one's getting deep. The desert rose smelled worse in the morning, like damp carpet and sour beer, the kind of stink that stuck to your skin. Roxy Hart slumped on the edge of her bed in room 8, the springs groaning under her weight, her flip-flops kicked off beside a pile of crumpled clothes. The $10 from last night sat on the nightstand, smoothed out next to a half-empty pack of menthols and a lighter that barely sparked. She'd paid Pete at dawn, $7 for the room, $3 for a stale donut, and a Coke from the vending machine downstairs. Her stomach still growled, but she ignored it, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, a brown bloom that looked bigger every day. She hadn't slept much, kept replaying that coffee with Vince, his quiet voice saying, "She's my kid." Lila. The name rattled around in her head, tied to a blurry memory of a scrawny girl with chopped hair and a split lip, begging Roxy to get her out of Stardust's back room 10 years back. She'd done it. Dragged her past Johnny and his drunk buddies, took a shove for it, thought it'd blow over. It didn't. Next night, the manager canned her, said she'd caused a scene. And Johnny turned on her too, left her with nothing but a bruised ego and a busted dream. Roxy rubbed her eyes, mascara flaking onto her fingers, and lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up in the dim light. Vince's face stuck with her, tired, rough, but not judging, not like the usual Johns who saw her as a quick fix or a punching bag. "Bullshit," she muttered, blowing a cloud toward the ceiling. Guys like him didn't just buy you coffee. They wanted something, always did. Still, his offer nagged at her, a crack of light in the dark she'd been living in too long. A knock rattled the door. Sharp, impatient. Roxy flinched, stubbing the cigarette on the nightstand, ash scattering. "Who's it?" she called, voice hoarse, half expecting Pete with another late fee. "Open up, Rox," came a drawl she knew too well, low, lazy, dripping with trouble. Johnny. Her gut twisted, a cold knot forming fast. She cracked the door, chain still on, and there he was. Johnny Vega, leaning on the frame, his faded leather jacket reeking of cheap cologne and yesterday's whiskey. His hair was thinning now, slicked back with too much gel, and his grin showed a chipped tooth she remembered from their last fight. "What do you want?" she snapped, keeping the chain taut, her hand trembling on the knob. "Just checking in," Johnny said, peering through the gap, his eyes raking over her like she was meat on a hook. "Heard you're still kicking around this dump. Still got those moves, huh? Too bad nobody cares." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound, and tapped the door frame with a knuckle. Roxy's jaw tightened, heat flushing her neck. "You ruined me, Johnny. Happy now?" she said, voice shaking but sharp. "Get lost. I got nothing for you." He smirked, leaning closer, his breath sour through the crack. "Ruined you? Nah, babe. You let it happen. Should have kept your nose out of my business that night. Little princess didn't need saving. You just had to play hero." He shrugged, casual, like he hadn't torched her life. "Look where it got ya!" "Fuck you!" she spat, slamming the door. but he wedged a boot in, stopping it cold. Her heart pounded, old fear clawing up her spine. "I said, get out!" Johnny chuckled, pulling his foot back slow, like he'd won anyway. "Still got fire. Cute. Stay safe, Rox. Vegas, don't forget." He turned, whistling some shitty tune, and disappeared down the stairs, his boots echoing on the metal. Roxy locked the door, slid the chain, and sank against it, her breath ragged. Her hands shook as she lit another cigarette, the flame flickering till she got it going. Johnny's words burned. You let it happen. And she hated how they stuck, how they felt half true. She'd fought that night, sure. But after? She'd folded, let him drag her down, let this city grind her into nothing. She glanced at the $10, the last of her haul, and felt the weight of it all. $3 a night, a lifetime of motel rooms, a past she couldn't claw back. Her phone buzzed. An old flip job she'd scavenged from a pawn shop, screen cracked but working. She flipped it open. A text from a number she didn't know. "Coffee again? Room's open if you need it, Vince." She stared at it, thumb hovering, the cigarette smoldering between her fingers. He'd slipped her his number last night, scribbled on a napkin she'd shoved in her pocket. She hadn't planned to use it, didn't trust handouts, didn't trust him, but Johnny's visit left her rattled, and that room sounded like a lifeline she didn't want to need. She dialed, slow, the beeps loud in the quiet. He picked up on the third ring, voice rough like he'd just woken up. "Yeah?" "It's Roxy," she said, swallowing hard, ash falling to the floor. "That room still free?" A pause, then, "Yeah, you okay?" She laughed, short and bitter. "Peachy. Just maybe I need a night off this hellhole." Her voice cracked, betraying her, and she cursed herself for it. "No strings," Vince said, steady, like he'd heard worse. "Swing by the Desert Rose desk. Keys with Pete. I'll be around later." "Fine," she said, snapping the phone shut, her chest tight. She didn't like this, leaning on some guy she barely knew, but the motel felt smaller now. The walls closing in, Johnny's shadow too close. She grabbed her stuff, cigarettes, phone, a change of clothes stuffed in a plastic bag, and headed out, the morning sun harsh against her tired eyes. Vince was at his place across town, a one-story stucco box near the edge of Vegas, the kind with a gravel yard and a sagging porch. He'd left the Desert Rose after dropping the key with Pete, figuring Roxy'd show or she wouldn't. The USB sat on his kitchen counter, next to a mug of cold coffee and a stack of bills he hadn't opened. He'd watched the video again last night, couldn't help it. Her dance pulling him back to that night with Lila, the last time things felt halfway right before his ex took her and moved west. He didn't know why he'd texted her, didn't know what he was offering beyond a bed and a lock on the door. Maybe it was guilt, knowing she'd tanked helping his kid. Maybe it was just the way she'd looked at him in that diner, like she was daring him to care. He scribbled a note, "Room 5, crash as long as you need, V," and left it with Pete, then headed to the garage, burying himself in an oil change to keep his hands busy. Roxy got the key from Pete, who barely glanced up from his phone, muttering, "Malone says it's yours." Room 5 was cleaner than hers, motel standard, sure, but the sheets didn't smell like mildew, and the sink ran clear. She dropped her bag on the bed, the springs barely creaking, and sank down, staring at the dollar Vince had given her last night. She smoothed it out, the paper soft under her fingers, and felt a pang, something between relief and shame. Her phone buzzed again. "Vince, you in?" She typed back, slow. "Yeah, thanks, but I'm no charity case." His reply came quick. "Never said you were. Sleep tight." She tossed the phone aside. The cigarette burned out in her hand, and lay back, the ceiling blank and white for once. Johnny's voice echoed. You let it happen. And she squeezed her eyes shut, fighting it. Vince's room was a rope thrown her way, but she didn't know if she could climb it, or if she'd just hang herself with it. Across town, Vince wiped grease from his hands, the USB still on his counter. A quiet promise he hadn't voiced. He'd see her tonight, check in, figure out what the hell he was doing. For now, he let the engine hum drown out the questions, but Roxy's dance stayed with him, a rhythm he couldn't shake. Roxy's past just kicked her door in. Think Vince's room's a lifeline or a trap? Hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. This mess is thickening. The Desert Rose room Vince had given Roxy didn't smell like home. Too clean for that, with its faint whiff of bleach and motel soap. But it was a hell of a lot better than her usual dive. She'd been there 3 days, sleeping on the stiff bed, eating vending machine chips, and helping out around the place to keep her hands busy. She'd wiped down tables in the lobby, hauled trash bags for Pete, even fixed a leaky faucet in room 3 with a wrench she'd borrowed from the old man's toolbox. It wasn't much, but it kept her from feeling like a freeloader, kept her from bolting back to the streets she knew too well. Vince swung by every evening, casual as clockwork, boots scuffing the carpet, a paper cup of coffee in hand, asking, "You good?" She'd nod, mutter, "Yeah," and he'd leave it at that. No prying, no preaching. She didn't trust it. Not fully. But the quiet was starting to grow on her, a break from the chaos she'd worn like a second skin. The USB was still gone, lost somewhere between her old room and this one, but she hadn't noticed yet, too caught up in the rhythm of survival to miss it. That afternoon, the heat pressed down on Vegas like a fist, the air thick and shimmering over the asphalt. Roxy sat on the curb outside, a cigarette dangling from her lips, the smoke curling up past her squinting eyes. She'd swapped the nylon dress for a faded tank top and jeans from a thrift bag Pete kept behind the desk, still cheap but less like a costume. Her flip-flops tapped the pavement, restless, when Vince's Ford rolled up, dust kicking off the tires. He stepped out, ball cap pulled low, a brown paper sack under his arm. "Got something for you," he said, voice rough but steady, tossing her the sack. She caught it, paper crinkling, and peeked inside. 2 turkey sandwiches on white bread, a bag of Fritos, a couple of Cokes sweating cold. She raised an eyebrow, flicking ash. "What's this, Christmas?" "Just lunch," he said, leaning against the truck, arms crossed. "Figured you're sick of vending crap." Roxy snorted, but her stomach growled loud enough to sell her out. "Thanks," she muttered, pulling out a sandwich and tearing into it, the bread soft against her teeth. She ate quick, crumbs falling, while Vince watched, sipping from his own Coke, the can dented in his grip. "Been thinking," he said after a minute, staring at the horizon where the strip's lights flickered faint against the daylight. "You're not a maid here. Don't gotta earn your keep like this." She swallowed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Ain't staying for free," she said sharp, like he'd stepped on a nerve. "I don't take handouts. Told you that." "Not a handout," he said, meeting her eyes, steady. "A favor. You helped Lila. I owe you more than a room." Roxy's jaw tightened, the cigarette burning down to the filter. "That was 10 years ago," she said, flicking it to the curb, sparks scattering. "Don't owe me shit. She's your kid, not my burden." Vince nodded, slow, like he'd expected that. "Fair enough. But I found her. Lila. She's in Reno now, sewing clothes, got a little shop. Talked to her yesterday." Roxy froze, sandwich halfway to her mouth, a cold jolt running down her spine. "She's okay?" she asked, voice softer than she meant, the memory of that scared kid flashing back, big eyes, bloody lip, clinging to her arm in Stardust's grimy hall. "Yeah," Vince said, a faint smile tugging his mouth. Tough as hell. Takes after her mom. Told her about you. She wants to see you. The words hit like a punch, quiet, but heavy. Roxy set the sandwich down, hands trembling just enough to notice. "Why?" she croaked, throat dry despite the coke. "I didn't do much. Just got her out. Didn't even know her name till you said it." "She remembers," Vince said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Says you were the only one who gave a damn that night. Wants to say thanks, face to face." Roxy looked away, out at the heat waves rippling over the street, her chest tight. "Don't need thanks," she muttered, but it sounded weak, even to her. She'd carried that night like a scar. Johnny's fists, the manager's sneer, the slow slide into nothing. But knowing Lila made it out felt like a crack in the weight, small but real. "She's coming tomorrow," Vince said, standing, brushing dust off his jeans. "Coffee shop down the block. Moe's, noon. Up to you if you show." He paused, then added, "I'm selling this place, the hotels, done with Vegas, moving to Wyoming, Lander, room's yours till then." She stared at him, the Fritos crunching in her fist. "Wyoming? What's there, cows and dirt?" "Quiet," he said, shrugging. "Space. Lila's thinking of coming too. You could—" He stopped, catching himself, then finished. "Just think about it." Roxy laughed, short and rough. "Me in Wyoming? I'd scare the cows." But her eyes flickered, a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, maybe hope, maybe just exhaustion wearing thin. The next day, Moe's smelled the same. Burnt oil, stale coffee, a hint of bleach from the counter. Roxy walked in at 11:55, her tank top sticking to her back, jeans stiff from the heat. She'd almost bailed, spent the morning pacing room 5, telling herself it didn't matter. But her feet dragged her here anyway, drawn by a pull she couldn't name. Vince sat in their booth, sipping black coffee, and beside him was Lila, 26 now, short black hair streaked purple, tattoos curling up her arms, a denim vest over a ripped tee. She looked up as Roxy slid in, her hazel eyes, Vince's eyes, wide and searching. "You're her," Lila said, voice low, a faint tremble in it. "The dancer. Dad said you saved me." Roxy shrugged, awkward, hands fidgeting with a napkin. "Didn't save much. Just got you out. You were a kid." Lila leaned forward, elbows on the table, the vinyl creaking. "That kid was me. Hammered, scared shitless, stuck with some asshole who'd have broken my nose if you hadn't stepped in. You didn't have to, but you did." Her voice cracked, and she swiped at her eyes, quick, like she hated crying. "I never forgot that." Roxy's throat closed. The coffee Doris dropped off untouched in front of her. "Cost me everything," she said, quiet, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Job, place, whole damn life. Didn't know it'd stick with you." Lila reached across, grabbing Roxy's hand, her grip rough but warm. "It did. I got out 'cause of you. Ran home, got clean, left that jerk. You're why I'm here." She squeezed, hard. "Thank you." Roxy pulled back, blinking fast, the napkin shredded in her lap. Don't thank me," she said, voice thick. "I'm a mess. Look at me." "You're not." Vince cut in, steady, his mug clinking as he set it down. "You're still here, still fighting. That's more than most." Lila nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Dad's right. And he's bailing on Vegas. Told me last night. I'm going to Wyoming. Come with us." Roxy's head snapped up, her breath catching. "What?" "Start over," Vince said, leaning back, arms crossed. I'm done with this city. Ate me up, spit me out too. Lander's small, quiet. Got a house lined up. Room for you if you want it. I don't fit in your world, Roxy said, fast, panic creeping in. I'm nobody now. You don't need me dragging you down. Lila grinned, crooked, her tattoos catching the light. You fit in mine. I need you there. Someone's got to teach me how to dance like that. Roxy stared, the room tilting, coffee steam curling between them. I'm scared as hell, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper, her hands balling into fists. I don't know how to be anything else. Vince met her eyes, calm, sure. Me too, kid. That's why we're going. Figure it out together. She looked from him to Lila, their faces open, waiting, and felt something shift, sharp, fragile, like a crack letting light in. Okay, she said finally, voice calm, eyes wet. But I'm not promising I won't mess it up. Lila laughed, soft. Good. Neither am I. Vince nodded, a faint smile breaking through. Deal. The coffee cooled on the table, untouched, as Roxy sat there, hands trembling, the weight of 10 years starting to lift. Just a little, just enough to breathe. Roxy's got a shot at a new start. Think she'll take it? Hit subscribe and share your feels in the comments. This ride's turning big. Lander, Wyoming smelled like pine and dust, a far cry from the neon stink of Vegas. The house Vince had rented was a weathered, clapboard box on the edge of town. Peeling white paint, a porch that creaked underfoot, a yard patchy with grass and gravel. Inside, it was sparse but warm. A wood stove in the corner, a beat-up sofa Lila had dragged from a thrift shop, a kitchen table scratched from years of use. Roxy Hart stood in the doorway of her room, small, bare, with a single window facing the mountains, and felt the quiet press in, heavy and strange. 3 weeks in, and she still woke up expecting the hum of slot machines or Pete's grumbling down the hall. Vince had sold the last of his Vegas hotels, pocketed enough to buy this place, and a rusty garage downtown where he'd started fixing cars, trucks mostly, for ranchers who didn't care about his past. Lila set up a sewing corner in the living room, her machine whirring late into the night, stitching vests and skirts she sold online. Roxy didn't have a plan, didn't know how to fit here. So she scrubbed floors, cooked greasy eggs, kept busy to dodge the question of what came next. The USB was still missing, forgotten in the shuffle of leaving, but she hadn't danced since Stardust, hadn't even thought about it till Lila brought it up. That morning, the air was crisp, frost dusting the windows as Roxy swept the porch, the broom scraping rough against the wood. Lila poked her head out, purple bangs falling in her eyes, a mug of tea steaming in her hand. Hey, she said, grinning. Got a favor. Some kids at the community center asked about dance lessons. Thought you could show 'em a thing or two. Roxy stopped, leaning on the broom, her stomach twisting. Me? I don't dance anymore, she said, sharp, brushing past it like a burn. That's old news. Find someone else. Lila didn't budge, stepping onto the porch in mismatched socks. Come on, Rox. You were badass back then. I saw it. Just a few steps, nothing big. They'd love it. No, Roxy snapped, louder than she meant, the broom clattering to the boards. I'm not that girl. Haven't been for years. I'd look like a damn fool. She turned away, arms crossed tight, the cold biting her bare hands. Lila sighed, setting the mug down with a soft clink. Fine, but I'm not letting it go. You're better than you think. She ducked back inside, leaving Roxy alone with the wind and her own thudding heart. The day dragged on, gray clouds rolling in, and Roxy kept moving, chopping onions for stew, hauling firewood, anything to shake Lila's words. But they stuck, digging in, and when Vince got home, grease on his knuckles, a faint smile as he kicked off his boots, she felt the pressure double. "Lila's on about dancing again," he said, casual, stirring the pot on the stove. "She's right. You should try it." "Drop it," Roxy muttered, slamming a plate down harder than she meant, the crack echoing in the small kitchen. "I'm not some show pony. I can't." He nodded, slow, not pushing, but his quiet made her itch worse. She hated how they saw something in her she couldn't, hated how it felt like a lie. That evening, a knock rattled the door, sharp and out of place. Roxy answered, expecting a neighbor, but there stood Johnny Vega, older, leaner, his leather jacket swapped for a flannel shirt, a delivery cap tilted on his head. He held a package, some fabric Lila'd ordered, but his grin was the same, chipped tooth glinting under the porch light. "Well, damn," he said, voice slow and slick. "Heard you're playing house. Still a hooker to me, Rox." Her breath caught, a cold flush spreading fast. "Get lost," she hissed, grabbing the package, her hands shaking. "I'm done with you. Go." Johnny leaned in, close enough she smelled the tobacco on him, his eyes glinting. "Nah, you're just pretending. Can't wash that off. Vegas don't let go." He tapped the door frame, smirking. "See you around, doll." She slammed the door, the package hitting the floor with a thud, and sank against it, chest heaving. Vince appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. "Who was that?" he asked, brow furrowing. "Johnny," she said, voice flat, staring at the wall. "Ex-asshole from Stardust. Says I'm still trash." Vince's jaw tightened, but he didn't push, just nodded. "He's wrong. You're here. That's what counts." "Does it?" she shot back, standing, her voice breaking. "He's right. I can't outrun this. I'm nothing now, just a washed-up nobody faking it." She stormed to her room, slamming the door, the wood rattling in the frame. She sat on the bed, head in her hands, Johnny's words looping, "Still a hooker, can't wash that off," and felt the years crash down, the motel, the streets, the men who'd paid her to forget herself. She'd come to Wyoming to escape, but it followed her anyway, a stain she couldn't scrub. The stew simmered in the kitchen, Lila's machine hummed, and Roxy wanted to run. Back to Vegas, back to the dark she knew, but her legs wouldn't move. The next day, Lila dragged her to the community center, a drafty barn turned rec hall, its wood floors scuffed and splintered. "Just watch," Lila said, shoving her toward a folding chair. A dozen kids, 8 to 12, all boots and braids, milled around, giggling, waiting for a lesson Lila'd promised. Roxy sat, arms crossed, her tank top damp with sweat despite the chill, ready to bolt. Lila clapped her hands, grinning. "Okay, guys, this is Roxy. She's a dancer, used to light up Vegas. Show 'em something, Rox." Roxy's stomach dropped, her throat closing. "I told you no," she hissed, standing, but the kids turned, eyes bright, waiting. She froze, pinned by their stares, her hands clammy. "I can't. I'm nothing now," she said, voice cracking, tears stinging hot. "I'm a fraud. Don't look at me like that." A girl, maybe 10, freckles dusting her nose, stepped up, her sneakers squeaking. "You're not a fraud," she said, quiet but sure. "You're my teacher. I like you." She held out a hand, small and steady, and the others nodded, murmuring, "Yeah, come on." Roxy's breath hitched, her vision blurring. She wanted to run, to scream, but that hand, open, waiting, stopped her cold. "Okay," she whispered, wiping her eyes, the tears smearing on her sleeve. One step. Just one. She moved to the center, legs shaky, and showed them a basic sway, hips shifting, arms loose, the way she'd started at Stardust. The kids copied, clumsy but eager, their laughter bouncing off the walls. Roxy's chest ached, a mix of panic and something else, something warm, fragile, like a memory waking up. She stumbled, caught herself, and kept going, her voice hoarse as she said, "Like this, slow." Vince slipped in, leaning against the doorframe, grease still on his hands from the garage. He watched, quiet, as Roxy moved, awkward, rusty, but there, alive in a way he hadn't seen. Lila grinned beside him, whispering, "Told you." He nodded, then stepped closer as the kids clapped, the lesson ending in a mess of cheers. "They don't see your scars," Vince said low, his voice cutting through the noise. "Neither do I." Roxy turned, her face flushed, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Maybe," she said, voice rough, "but it hurts like hell to be this." She waved at the room, the kids, herself. He stepped up, close enough she smelled the oil on him, steady as ever. "That's how you know it's real," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "You're doing it anyway." She looked at him, then Lila, then the kids still buzzing around, and felt the crack widen, not breaking her, but letting something through. Johnny's shadow lingered, heavy, but here, in this drafty barn, it didn't own her, not tonight. She wiped her face again, nodding slow. "Maybe I can try," she said, barely audible, "but I'm still scared as shit." Vince clapped her shoulder, light, solid. "Good. That's where it starts." The kids ran off, the barn emptying out, and Roxy stood there, alone in the quiet, her hands trembling but still. She'd danced, one step, one crack, and it hurt, but it held. Roxy's breaking or building. Think she'll keep dancing. Hit subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments. The end's closing in. The Wyoming winter crept in slow, frosting the windows of the Lander house with thin, jagged patterns that caught the morning light. Roxy Hart stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, the steam curling up past her nose. The room smelled like burnt toast and pine from the wood stove crackling in the corner, a steady hum against the quiet. 3 months since that shaky dance lesson in the barn, and she'd kept at it, teaching the kids once a week, simple steps on a scuffed floor, her voice still rough but steadier now. It wasn't Stardust, wasn't even close, but it was something, small, real, hers. Vince clattered in from the garage, grease streaking his knuckles, his breath puffing white as he kicked snow off his boots. "Damn cold out there," he muttered, grabbing a mug from the sink and pouring coffee that had been sitting too long. He leaned against the counter, watching her, a faint grin tugging his mouth. "You're up early? Kids again?" "Yeah," Roxy said, sipping, the bitter taste grounding her. "They're getting good. Messy, but good." She set the mug down, her fingers tracing the cracks, and glanced at him. "Still feels weird, though. Like I'm faking it." "You're not," he said, steady, like always. "They don't think so. Neither do I." She shrugged, a half-smile breaking through, but didn't argue. Vince had a way of saying things that stuck, quiet but solid, and she'd stopped fighting it as much. Lila burst in then, her sewing machine silent for once, purple hair tangled from sleep. She carried a small envelope, yellowed, edges curling, her grin wide and crooked. "Found this in Dad's junk," she said, tossing it to Roxy. "Mom's handwriting. Check it out." Roxy caught it, brow furrowing, the paper brittle under her fingers. "What's this?" she asked, flipping it over. "Vince, keep," was scrawled on the front, faded ink from years back. "Open it," Lila said, leaning on the table, her socks mismatched as usual. "It's from after Stardust. Thought you'd want to see." Roxy hesitated, her chest tightening, then tore it open slow, the rip loud in the quiet. Inside was a single sheet, folded tight, the handwriting shaky but clear. Vince's ex-wife, Lila's mom, gone 5 years now from cancer. She read aloud, voice catching. "Vince, that dancer at Stardust's got heart. Saved Lila tonight. Tell her thanks. She's worth keeping safe." The date was December 2013, a week after that night. Her hands shook, coffee forgotten, and she sank into a chair, the wood creaking under her. "Someone cared," she whispered, tears pricking hot, her throat closing. "Even then, someone saw me." She looked up, eyes wet, at Vince and Lila staring back. Him still, her grinning soft. "She did," Vince said, voice low, setting his mug down with a clink. "Told me that night. That girl's special. I didn't get it till now." He stepped closer, leaning on the table, his hazel eyes steady. "I see it too. Always will." Lila plopped down beside her, nudging her shoulder. "You're stuck with us, Rox. Mom knew. Your family." Roxy wiped her face, rough, the letter crinkling in her grip. "Didn't think anyone gave a damn," she said, voice thick, a sob breaking free. "Not then. Not now." "They did," Vince said, clapping her shoulder, light but sure. "And we do." That afternoon they hauled paint cans to the community center barn, sky blue, a gallon Lila'd scored cheap from a hardware store closing down. The kids were gone, the space empty, just the three of them and the echo of their steps. Roxy dipped a brush, the smell sharp and clean, and started on a wall, her strokes uneven but firm. Vince rolled the big patches, sleeves pushed up, while Lila splashed paint on her jeans, laughing when it hit her hair. "Star time," Roxy said, quiet, grabbing a smaller brush and dipping it in white. She climbed a stool, wobbly, and painted a star on the blue, small, crooked, but hers. She stepped back, paint streaking her knuckles, and stared at it, chest tight. "For the me I lost," she said, voice low, "and the one I found." Vince nodded, setting his roller down, a smudge of blue on his cheek. "Looks good, kid." Lila hugged her, quick and hard, paint smearing between them. "Damn right it does." 5 years later, the barn smelled like sawdust and sweat, the blue walls faded but holding, Roxy's star still bright in the corner. She stood in the middle, 40 now, her dark hair tied loose, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie, no trace of the nylon dress she'd left in Vegas. The room buzzed with kids, 15 of them, ages 8 to 14, stomping and spinning to a beat from an old Bluetooth speaker Lila'd rigged up. Roxy clapped her hands, voice rough but clear. "Slower, Jay. Feel it, don't rush." The boy, 12, all elbows and grin, nodded, adjusting, his sneakers squeaking on the wood. She showed him again, hips swaying, arms loose, a shadow of stardust, but softer now, worn in. The others followed, a mess of giggles and stumbles, and she smiled, small, real, the kind that had taken years to fit her face. Vince leaned in the doorway, hair grayer, hands still greasy from the garage, watching her move. He'd built a life here, fixing trucks, brewing bad coffee, keeping the house warm, and she'd built one beside him, step by shaky step. Lila sat cross-legged nearby, her sewing machine humming as she stitched a denim skirt, her tattoos peeking from a rolled sleeve. She'd stuck around, turned her online gig into a steady thing, and the three of them had settled into something solid, family, not by blood, but by choice. "Nice one, Miss Roxy," a girl called. Ellie, 9, braids swinging. As the lesson wrapped up, the kids scattering to grab coats. She ran over, digging in her pocket, and pressed $1 into Roxy's hand, crumpled and warm. "For the dance," she said, grinning, then bolted out, her laughter echoing. Roxy held it, the paper soft, and felt a pang, sharp, sweet, a memory of neon nights, and a man who'd handed her $1 instead of a judgment. She crossed to the wall, tucking it under the star with a thumbtack, next to a dozen others the kids had given her over the years. Vince stepped up, his shadow falling beside hers, and she turned, catching his eye. $1 started this," she said, voice low, a smile tugging her mouth. "Nah," he said, nudging her with an elbow, grease smudging her sleeve. "You did, kid. Took guts to take it." She laughed, rough and real, the sound bouncing off the walls. "Guess so." Outside, the Wyoming dusk painted the sky orange, the air crisp with snow on the way. Lila packed up her machine, calling, "Dinner's on me. Pizza, not your burnt toast, Dad." Vince groaned, mock offended, and Roxy followed them out, the barn door creaking shut behind her. The kids' voices faded down the street, the quiet settling in, and she paused, looking back at the star through the window. Small, steady hers. She'd lost everything once, stardust, her name, her spark, and spent years clawing through the wreckage. Vegas had chewed her up, Johnny had kicked her down, but here, in this nowhere town, she'd found a rhythm again. Not the one she'd dreamed of at 25, all silk and spotlight, but this one, scratched floors, kid laughter, a family she hadn't seen coming. The dollar bills under the star fluttered in the draft, each one a step, a lesson, a hand pulling her up. She'd asked for $1 that night, not knowing it had led here, not knowing she'd have to fight herself hardest to take it. Vince clapped her shoulder as they walked to the truck, Lila ahead, bickering about toppings. "Never thought I'd trade Vegas for this," he said, his breath fogging in the cold. "Me neither," Roxy replied, climbing in, the seat creaking under her. "But it's ours." The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the dusk, and she leaned back, the star glowing faint in her mind, a mark of the me she'd lost and the one she'd built, $1 at a time. Roxy danced her way home. "How's this hit you?" Hit subscribe and share your fave moment in the comments. Thanks for riding this road with us.